Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway is a good little movie. And not just a good Gundam movie either, but a generally good bit of filmmaking as a whole. And I should know, as I have a Bachelor's of Science in Digital Filmmaking and Video Production. Now sure, the for-profit institution that gave it to me no longer exists, and its parent company was, and still is, being sued into oblivion for its malicious recruitment practices, but that's not the point. Nor is the fact that I only have a degree with that title on it because the school changed the program's name without warning, despite many of us not actually wanting to go into filmmaking per se. I am officially an filmmaker. Regardless of the clerical error at the registrar's office that prevented me from getting my $48,000 piece of paper before the school closed. As any film major will tell you, having a degree makes your opinions on any given motion picture exponentially more valid than, say, someone actively working in the industry. And my enlightened opinion is that Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway is good. And since the school promised that I'd be able to pay off my absurd student loan debt with the knowledge I gained from their for-profit institution, I intend today to do just that. By doing something extremely wicked. Sharing opinions on the internet. If you've spent any length of time in the Gundam community, you've likely come across this image, posted by random_factor on Twitter back in 2016. Wow, cool robot, the onlooker says, while blissfully ignoring the robot, trying to tell the onlooker that war is bad. Sociopolitical subtext is the heart of the Gundam franchise, especially in the best parts of the main Universal Century timeline. And Hathaway is no exception. The story revolves around the trials and tribulations of moody space noid wannabe Hathaway Noah, son of one bright, I'm one with the slap and the slap is with me, Noah, and the gang of less than subtle Earth terrorists, Mafti, who are perhaps best described as late-stage Neo Zeon finds an anarchist bookstore, next to a Spirit Halloween. Hathaway's motives are a carbon copy of the official Char clone playbook. Well-meaning 20-something wishes to free the people from the perceived tyranny and corruption of the Earth Federation elite, using questionable methods and a healthy dose of vain pretension. But what makes Hathaway interesting is that he's grown up on the other side of the war from your run-of-the-mill Char clone. Daddy Dearest is one of the most well-recognized and highly regarded captains in the Earth Federation, after all. Mix in a healthy dose of tragic backstory and imposter syndrome as a result of the most overrated of the Gundam films, Don't At Me, it's easy to understand why Hathaway would turn away from his brief time in service to the Earth Federation, deciding instead to murder a bunch of people on a plane. That is until a group of copycats try to steal his thunder and are quickly dispatched, because the movie's only just started and we have a runtime to consider. Notice, by the way, how we've gone a full 4-ish minutes into a review of a movie from a giant robot franchise, and we haven't talked once about the giant robots. There are all of 2 major robot fights in this entire movie, and the titular Penelope and Cassie Gundam are only on screen for a few minutes at all, which might be the best decision director, I'm gonna butcher this and I apologize, Shuko Murase could have made going into this ambitious project, because Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway is the most intimate, character-driven Gundam story in decades. Not as intimate as $30,000 of student loan debt weighing on your conscience every waking hour of every day for the next 20 years, but thanks to this video and magical internet assets, I have a plan. Right, so now for the fun parts when we try to make money off of this thing. And I had an idea.
Now, the internet tells me that NFTs are very energy inefficient, but the thing is, I think that I've actually figured out an alternative solution which is much, much more energy efficient and just as secure and legitimate as NFTs. See, NFTs, they stand for non-fungible tokens, and from what I gather, non-fungible tokens means that it's a token that cannot be funged. So really all I need is a token, something that links my video to that token, and a way to make that token non-fungible or unique. And I know just the place to get such a token.
Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway is not a story about giant robots. It's not even a story about the Earth Federation or sci-fi Jack Skellington over here. It's about Hathaway, and a horny Earth Federation captain, and a new type woman with her own curious motives. Early on, Hathaway encounters Gigi Andalucia, I think, who mind melds with Hathaway, letting him know that the Mafti folks who boarded the plane, which we talked about earlier, are full of shit. Unaware that she was in fact talking telepathically to the leader of Mafti itself, Mafti Nalvi Erin. The alias is comprised of Sudanese, Arabic, and Old Irish words that translate together to, quote, the righteous king of prophets. An odd choice for a character as stoic and conflicted as Hathaway is throughout this movie. Whereas most traditional Gundam antagonists couple oozing charisma with a need to fulfill their own ideals by any means necessary, Hathaway comes off much more subdued, choosing to keep his ideals to himself and his close comrades. He knows when to shut his mouth, or just say the right thing to deflect conversation away from his secretive nature. He's not unlike Origin-era Char Aznavour in that regard, though he's shown to take a step back from early Char's one-track ruthlessness. Hathaway, on the other hand, is much more nuanced, balancing his more grandiose goals as a self-affirmed freedom fighter with the need to escape from his father's shadow, and his desire for a simpler life with someone he can care about. Because of all of this, he shows compassion even when it directly conflicts with those more grandiose goals. Like when he opts to stay and help Gigi, who's caught in the crossfire of a mobile suit battle, instead of evacuating the scene with his fellow Earth terrorists. We see him questioning his actions, worried that his attitude towards Gigi is leading him to make the same mistakes he did with that Hatsune Miku-looking worse girl in that other movie. Throughout all of his trials and tribulations, we see that Hathaway isn't just some one-track-minded Kingslayer. He's just a kid that wants to care about someone or something on his own terms, rather than the ones attached to his last name. Because the film is stuffed to the gills with this sort of interpersonal drama, the actual fighting of giant robots takes a bit of a back seat. But when the fighting starts, every hit, every rifle blast, every step the machines take has a weight not seen in Gundam since War in the Pocket. A show from a time when people could still go to arcades without half the machines being oversized versions of phone apps. Speaking of, we arrive at a place called Pinballs. And as the name might suggest, the arcade is loaded with a massive collection of pinball machines and other assorted games designed explicitly to steal your money, like microtransactions made manifest. The perfect place to obtain my new, shiny, energy-efficient token. But immediately, there was a problem.
Right, so, small problem. I haven't actually been in here for about 15 months. Mainly because, the state of the world. I'm fully vaccinated, that's not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is that all of these machines, including the super old ones, now have little card readers and don't actually take coins. Really gonna screw up my thing if I can't find any tokens.
Eventually, I did find a machine tucked in next to some stairs that did dispense tokens, for a few coin slider games scattered around the place that no one plays anymore. All that remained now was to make it unique and tie it to the video you are watching now. Which also means finishing the video, so here you go. Mecha battles in space will never have the same weight as those on the ground. You don't get the same sense of scale against a backdrop of infinite black nothingness. That's why Gundam fights are at their best when set against a scene with squishy humans, completely powerless to stop the carnage filling the rest of the scene. Hathaway pulls this off with tremendous effect. In fact, the first time we see any mobile suits of consequence in the entire movie, it's from near ground level, with a person manning a gun turret on the machine's crotch. We, the audience, don't even get to see the whole thing, because the characters we're focusing on are accessories to the world around them, as the manhunters roll into town to flush out citizens who the movie tells us shouldn't be there or something. This scene largely exists to establish some evidence of the oppression that Hathaway and Mafia are so hell-bent on snuffing out, more so than to establish a clear antagonist. So I largely forgot about it once Messers started landing in trees and started duking it out with Gustav Karls, while we watch Hathaway and friends scatter from the pandemonium of it all. We aren't focused on the fighting itself, but rather the chaos it induces. And it's that emphasis on the human element in this scene that, in my objectively correct opinion, makes it so brilliant. Now, I will admit, it has been a couple weeks since I obtained my energy-efficient token from pinballs. And since then, COVID Delta has reared its ugly head, so I won't be heading back there for a little while. Now, there is one upside, and that's that I've had plenty of free time to come up with the perfect solution for my energy-efficient token that you can buy, and that I will keep. Now, it does seem that it would take me a little more heavy lifting than I anticipated to make this token work. Primarily because I would need to load a video on it that I didn't actually finish yet. So what I've done is I've taken a micro SD card and loaded it with all of the footage that I'll be using for this video. This section not included. What we've done basically is something very avant-garde, very unique. I am providing you a deconstructed piece of artwork here, making it even more valuable because it's kind of like one of those bougie sandwiches you get for $15 at the fancy shop down the street. It's not really a sandwich, but it's all the parts that are there. In reality, the sandwich is what you make it. This NFT is what you make it. That'll sell, right? Now, this isn't all to say that my opinions of the film are completely without criticisms, however. While the production value overall is very good, you do have the occasional low-detail action shot as well as some odd dialogue pacing in the English dub, which is the version I watched. But notice how far we've got in this review without even talking about the flagship mobile suits of the film. The Cassie, or Kasai, depending on which voice actor you ask, and Penelope. The Penelope is piloted by Federation Greenhorn Lane Aim, whom the Gundam Wiki helpfully tells us is, quote, a character from the Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway movie. And that's it. There really isn't much to say about Lane Aim, or indeed the Penelope or Cassie. Other than the Cassie ripping its way out of its shipping container was pretty neat, I guess. Their brief fight was fine too, very flashy with lots of spinning around. But there isn't much going on here to get me invested in these two characters' supposed budding rivalry. In fairness, the fight feels more like a setup for the next two films, and I'll be interested to see if this new conflict is given room to breathe over the remainder of the planned trilogy. Nothing about these points were enough to take me out of the action, but there is one unavoidable strike against the movie that did become a distraction at certain points, and it all has to do with how it was presented. This movie was released on Netflix here stateside, as well as in most other locations outside of Japan. While there isn't anything wrong with digital distribution per se, you naturally get higher digital video compression compared to watching a Blu-ray or seeing it in theaters. Some of the movie's best scenes are animated in very dark spaces, and digital streaming does not like dark colors. Even for the best compression algorithms out there, they still struggle with differentiating multiple blacks, grays, and deep color levels, leading to pixelation and color tearing. You probably didn't notice it the first time you watched it, but now that you know it's there, you'll never miss it. It also means that the scenes with high motion, such as the massive shower of sparks at the end of the Messer fight, end up looking like a 7th grader's Windows Movie Maker AMV from 2003. This movie deserves a theatrical release here stateside, even if it's just at more specialty theaters like Alamo Drafthouse here in Austin, or through Fathom's network of limited run events. As we slowly crawl our way out of a global pandemic that's dragged on for far too long, Delta variant notwithstanding, go get vaccinated for God's sake, I look forward to the time I can go back to the theater and see Gundam Hathaway the way it was meant to be seen, on a giant screen with huge speakers, with some popcorn in one hand and a beer probably in the other. I made a few comparisons earlier to War in the Pocket in this review, because it's what immediately comes to mind when you think of intimate, character-driven Gundam stories. But there's something different about the interpersonal drama in Hathaway that really makes it stand out here. In 0080 War in the Pocket, you have a child full of life and energy. You've got 2 warring pilots that just so happen to be neighbors in a short 6-episode runtime. The way the characters are set up and their plot threads intertwine is all set up for maximum tragedy at the end of the series. But with Hathaway, I don't know where this story's gonna end up, and I kind of appreciate that. This is a setup movie for a much bigger trilogy, and it spends its runtime on giving us interesting characters to get invested in, with their own motives and distinct personalities. They're imperfect, complex in their own ways, which makes me want to know what the rest of the story is going to end up shaping out to be. Exactly what the first movie in a planned trilogy should do. And while we wait, we have plenty of new bad Gunpla to work on for its source material, so long as the next one isn't delayed by the state of the world again. Now, if you happen to know any art investors, you mind sending them a link to this video, please? Thanks. See you next time.